After a winter full of trade rumors, mostly swirling around Luis Castillo, the Mariners wound up keeping their starting rotation completely intact. Now the only question is, how good will they be in 2025? Let's talk about it. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. This is Tidy Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today, we're kicking off our position preview series with a look at the Mariners starting rotation. But before we get into that, a reminder, as always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, you can check out our Patreon. All you have to do to check that out is click the link in the description of this episode. And also, yesterday, we announced that we have a 2025 Mariners preseason survey going on that we would love for you to be a part of. It's a series of very simple polls, stuff like what's your, level of confidence in the front office, ownership, stuff like that. We would love to hear your answers on those fronts. The link will be in the description of this episode, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on podcast platforms. So, we'll be using the data from your answers probably in a future episode or two over the next few weeks. So, we're beginning our position preview series here on the show now that we are exactly 30 days away from opening day. And why not kick things off with one of the best, if not the best, rotations in all of baseball. We could start with really any of these guys, but I think we'll start with Logan Gilbert. We'll see if he actually gets the ball on day one. I think he's earned that right. I think he did surpass Luis Castillo as the ace of the Mariners rotation with the year that he put together in 2024. He was just a better pitcher than Castillo. He was an all-star. Castillo wasn't. All that stuff. And then, you dive into the numbers and it becomes pretty clear. I mean, led the league in innings pitched in 2024 with 208 2/3, 949 Ks per nine. Just the second time he's averaged a strikeout per inning in his career. 160 walks per nine. That's a career best. Also had a career best mark in ground ball percentage, 45.1% in that regard. 3.23 ERA, 3.27 FIP, 3.11 xFIP, and was worth 4.1 FWAR. So pretty much career highs and career lows and all that across the board for Logan Gilbert in 2024. So really my question, Colby, is, was that peak Logan Gilbert? Is this just kind of who he is, or is there another gear here for him as we head into his now fifth season in Major League Baseball?
Yeah. It's always kind of hard to put a cap on what Logan can accomplish, because every year he comes back and he's tweaked something or he's changed something or he's added a pitch, which he wasn't allowed to do this year because only Andres Munoz is apparently the only one who could ever throw a nasty pitch, apparently. So it's hard to say that, you ever feel like Gilbert's done. And I don't think he is. I mean, now there are some things that I think are kind of overblown about where he could improve. Last year, there was a lot of talk about how he struggled on the road and he wasn't as good as he was at home, which, duh. I mean, you pitch at T-Mobile Park, your numbers are probably going to be better at T-Mobile Park. Most pitchers are going to be that way. But also, I think when you actually look at the numbers and you look at the starts that he made on the road, he had two really bad outings, pretty close. I don't think they were quite back-to-back, but they were pretty close to back-to-back, where he went against the Twins in Minnesota and against the Red Sox, obviously in Boston. He gave up like 15 earned in 6 innings. And in the other 100 or so innings he threw on the road, his ERA was sub 3. So he was actually really good on the road as well. So I don't think there's a home road problem here. I think one area you could see a little bit of improvement is, I still think there's more whiffs to be had. I still think his strikeout rate could go a little bit higher. Now, it's plenty good. Like, it's not like he can't avoid contact. I think, kind of the next thing for him is like, can you eliminate more of these blow up starts? Because Logan does tend to have, 3 or 4 a year. And I think
Right.
through ace, you usually only have maybe one of those a year. And,
Right.
other thing that Logan, I don't want to say struggled with, but we saw it a few times last year is that he would be motoring and he'd get, into the 7th inning, 8th inning.
Struggled to finish off starts.
Yeah. And then, he'd get a couple outs and then all of a sudden it's a single, it's a walk, and then it's a home run. And then all of a sudden, as we know, this offense isn't really built to score a bunch of runs and with 6 outs to work with. So, yeah, there was some struggling he did with just filling out or just finishing out starts. So, yeah, there are things like that he could work on. But Logan right now is already pretty good. Is there another step he could take? Sure. Yeah. I do think that there is more swing and miss still. And I do think that just kind of finishing off these starts and getting to the dugout and going 7 strong and regularly, which, for the most part he does do. But I think, just eliminating some of those late game mistake pitches and just kind of finishing off starts is probably the next evolution for Logan.
So let's talk about Luis Castillo. Kind of a step back year for him in 2024. Still a good year, but a step back year for sure for Castillo. And then, he had to spend this whole winter hearing his name crop up in rumors. He ends up not moving though. He's still in Seattle. We'll see how long that lasts. I mean, I would assume unless things go sideways for the team as a whole, he'll at least be a Mariner through the entire 2025 season. But once that no trade clause lifts, I believe on January 1st, we'll see what the Mariners do about that. But so this could very well be Castillo's last season as a Mariner. 3.64 ERA last year, 3.91 FIP, 3.82 xFIP, 2.3 F4, 8.98 Ks per 9. Ks per 9 went down pretty substantially last year. Walks per 9, pretty much the same, 241. Walks per 9, actually the lowest that he's posted in a Mariners uniform, over 175 and a third innings pitched. He did get hurt, just a minor injury towards the end of the year, but it happened so late that he wasn't able to make his way back in time for the end of the season. We just saw him pitch today. So I don't know if you have any takeaways from what you saw today against the Dodgers, but overall, how are you feeling about Luis?
Still well. I mean, I think there is a lot of kind of unfounded concern that like Luis has found the cliff, it's here, and just because he wasn't, great last year, I think that's a little bit unfounded. He was pretty good last year, obviously not as good as you wanted him to be. But he was well on his way to making, to giving you 200 quality innings, which is kind of what he does. And the strikeouts were down, and that's kind of the big key here. The fastball was still really good, both of them. Plenty of whiffs on that. I mean, you got really good value out of the fastball. Slider wasn't quite where it needed to be, and the changeup was just unusable. So it's one of those things where like, do I feel good that Castillo is still like in the rotate? Like Luis Castillo is probably like at least the number 2 in like half the rotations in baseball. Probably more. And in the Mariners rotation, we could end the year with him being the true number 5, but he's really good. So it's kind of tough to, properly evaluate Castillo because it's hard not to compare him to his peers that are in the rotation with him. And objectively speaking, the other 4 guys had better year than Luis Castillo did last year. I think it's pretty close with George, but I think you get the edge to George there. So overall, I wasn't unimpressed with Castillo last year, but I wasn't wowed or anything like that. He needs to be a little bit better, but the fastball's still there. Like the slider is still fine. It just needs to be, cleaned up a little bit from where it was last year.
Yeah.
I really do feel like he needs to find a changeup again or a cutter, because the problem with Castillo last year, it was the lefties. Lefties ate him up, and he doesn't really have a good counter pitch for that. Because while Castillo only walked 2.4 guys per 9 last year, he doesn't have amazing command, right? His stuff is really good, but because it's so good, it's really hard to judge or anticipate the amount of movement you're going to get on a pitch. So a lot of times you'll see that 2-seamer, that sinker, start in off the plate, but then it runs right back over the middle of the plate to lefties and they crush it. So I think he needs a pitch to counter lefties. It doesn't sound like he added anything new this offseason. We haven't heard anything about that. I think
didn't notice anything new today.
No, I think a cutter would have been really good for Luis to learn. Now, that's not a particularly difficult pitch to learn. Maybe it's something he can pick up and use a little bit in season. But yeah, I think he needs something against lefties. And he threw a couple changeups today. They were pretty good. The movement on the changeup and all that stuff is fine. He just hasn't really thrown it over the last couple of years. And so I think he either needs to find the changeup again and get value out of that pitch once more, or he needs to add something to deal with the lefties, because I think the movement on the fastball is just really tough to predict from pitch to pitch, because he gets a ton of run. And I think that makes you dangerous against lefties. So I think he needs a weapon there. And I think if he can handle lefties better this year, he'll go right back to what he was, in 2023 and 2022.
Well, and him going away from the changeup kind of coincides with the ground ball rate going down substantially and the home run numbers going up. He's given up 25, or he gave up 25 this past year, 28 in 2023. It's not great. It's not great. No. And the ground ball rates in both of his full seasons with the Mariners has been sub 40%. Maybe the changeup is the key to getting that number back into at least the mid 40s where it was in 2022. And he was a 56% ground ball pitcher back in 2021. And he had to be pitching in, half of his games at Great American Ballpark. So I get it. You're pitching in T-Mobile Park. It's the most extreme pitcher friendly ballpark in the entire world. You can live with the ball being in the air a bit more than you can at really any other ballpark, but yeah, I would like to see him getting the ball back on the ground, trusting his defense a little bit more. I know it's not a great infield defense that the Mariners have aligned right now, but still, I think that would do wonders for him. And plus, the fastball is so good that the changeup is going to play off of that very, very well.
Yeah, I don't think the changeup has to be like Felix Hernandez level changeup to get value out of it, because again, the 4-seam and the 2-seam fastballs are both really good pitches for him. And so, he definitely needs to get more ground balls. He needs to figure out a way to get lefties out more consistently. But to your point today about the ground balls, I think all but one of his outs was a ground ball today. So maybe that's something.
Oh, and he had 2 ground balls on the changeup today.
Yeah. And it wasn't like the Dodgers A lineup. Ohtani's not in it, but the Dodgers B lineup is still kind of a major league quality lineup. So, especially just the handful of guys that Castillo faced. And the nice thing about asking Castillo to go back to the changeup is that he's had it for a long time, right? Yeah. It's been an effective pitch for him in his career. Like,
it used to be his bread and butter.
Right. It was 2-seam, is more 2-seam and changeup, which is why there was a high ground ball rate. So you're not asking him to do something he's never done before. You're kind of just asking him to rediscover something he's had. He's just kind of pushed into the back of his, arsenal over the last few years. He's much more been fastball slider in Seattle. And it just, I think he needs to be fastball changeup slider this year.
Agreed. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. We are previewing the Mariners starting rotation for the 2025 season. Let's talk about George Kirby. There are guys in this rotation that I'm more excited to watch in 2025, Colby, but there is no one that I'm more interested to watch in 2025 than George Kirby, because like I asked you with Logan Gilbert, is there another gear here when it comes to Kirby? 8.43 Ks per 9, still didn't generate enough swing and miss. 108 walks per 9, the walk rate still elite. 3.53 ERA, 3.26 FIP, 3.58 xFIP. He was worth 4.2 FWAR. Like, on the surface, amazing year, right? Did that over the course of 191 innings.
Yep.
Started 33 games. Like, really, like, when you look
to Logan.
Yeah, you look at those numbers, what more could you ask for out of George Kirby, right? But then you actually like peel back the layers and you look at the individual starts, and there were some pretty glaring issues with Kirby's year in 2024. I mean, you look at the start early on in the season against Cleveland. You look at both of the starts against the Tigers, especially the one at Comerica Park, where, his defense didn't do him any favors, but he also let that start unravel, right? He did not do anything to help stop the bleeding So I do wonder a little bit about the swing and miss. Obviously, that's the biggest question for me, just on from a technical standpoint. But I also do wonder about him emotionally on the mound a little bit as well. And he's someone that obviously does wear his emotions on his sleeve. And it does seem like some things do get to him pretty easily. So, like, I hate to say it, but like, I kind of want to see some maturity out of George Kirby in 2025 on the mound.
Yeah. I don't think we're the only ones that feel this way, but I do wonder if George is, I don't want to necessarily say wearing out his welcome, but there's a very certain type of pitcher that the Mariners like. And George checks a lot of those boxes, but I think what we see most of the time is George kind of like does things his own way. He's kind of like, he tinkers, but he doesn't really consult anybody. He doesn't work out with anybody in the off season. He just kind of throws to the grid thing. And this year he threw to a catcher. Ooh. And it's just one of those things where it's like, George is kind of out there a little bit. And remember the kind of the fit he threw about being asked to go out there and get a couple more outs against Tampa a few years ago. Mm-hmm. This year, there were times where it looked like after his defense made a mistake, he decided he was just going to pipe fastballs. And like, it does kind of read to me that I don't want to call it an attitude problem per se, but there seems to be some maturing that does need to happen emotionally and in that light. So it is interesting. As for, can he get better? I mean, sure, I think he can, but is he going to? I don't know. He's basically been the same dude since he showed up here, and that's fine. Like I said, that's not bad. Again, when you look at the numbers, it sounds like we're really nitpicking here, but I watched, right? I have eyes. I watched what George Kirby did, particularly in the month of August, and he was awful. He was awful. He was piping balls. He was giving up home runs. And a lot of the times it looked like he would just shut down when things didn't go his way. It's, again, I know that
those numbers in August, 6.84 ERA, 7.05 FIP, 4.66 xFIP. So defense not doing them favors, but
sure. But
the K rate went down even further. Home run to fly ball rate was really high.
Particularly that start in Detroit where he gave up 11 runs or whatever. Only 6 ended up counting against him, or 5 because of an error.
6, but
really, when you watch that game, that's the game. Kirby gave up. He just started piping fastballs. He wanted to get out of there.
3 home runs, 12 hits.
Right. So we could talk about he only gave up 6 that day, but I remember that game. I watched that game, and he should have been charged with all 11. It wasn't like he had an opportunity to get out of that inning without any more damage being done, and he just didn't. He wouldn't. So I do have questions about George's maturity level. I don't really doubt that he's going to have a good year. I doubt, can he take the next step and be a great pitcher like the guy? I don't know. I think he can. I think he has the potential to do it. I don't know if he can get there, because I do worry sometimes about whether or not he has matured enough.
It's just, is he a second tier guy, or is he a legitimate Cy Young contender?
Yeah. Can he be an ace, or is he just a really, really, really solid number 2 starter?
Yeah.
And if he's just a really solid number 2 starter,
that's more than fine.
I don't have any complaints about George on the field.
No. But it's just, I do think that there are some pretty clear areas where he can grow. And now, and again, like, I know we're saying all this stuff, and I want to make it clear, like, I don't want to assume things. I don't know George Kirby. I'm not in that clubhouse, right?
No.
But just from what I see, especially during some of those starts, is that, and look, again, he's a high competitor who wears his emotions on his sleeve, and that's great. That's great, but that can be a gift and a bit of a curse as well, right? So
works both ways.
Just, I would like to see him be able to reel that in a little bit more, particularly at times where things aren't going exactly his way.
Yeah.
So he can limit the damage, and he doesn't have an outing like the Cleveland start at the at the start of the year last year, or that one in Comerica.
Yeah. I mean, the Mariners don't mind their pitchers going out there and like showing emotion. We see Logan all the time. Yeah. But typically when things go south on Logan, it's just like, okay, whatever. We don't really see the emotion on the mound. When things go south for George, you could see kind of the pouty nature, and you can kind of see it seep in. And like I said, that works both ways. Curious George works both ways.
Yeah.
It either is elite or it's just like, screw this, I'm out of here type of attitude. At least, and that's, again, from 30,000 feet away, just watching on TV.
It's just like he rage quits a little bit.
It looks like he does, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, obviously nobody's going to go on the record from the Mariners and be like, yeah, that's kind of a thing. But, you just kind of look at some of the incidents that we do know about. You look at just kind of body language on the mound, which isn't always a great indicator, but sometimes it is. I think George is going to have a really nice season. And I hope he does take another step forward. I do think there is still more swing and miss to get here. But I wonder, more so than any of the other pitchers in this Mariners rotation, is like, is there some kind of mental block that is going to keep him from reaching his ceiling? Or is there some kind of emotional immaturity? I don't know, but I don't like that I have questions about it. Whereas the other four guys, I have no doubts in my mind about. And that's just,
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't want it to seem like we're piling on George, because he's fun to watch. I really enjoy having him. But those are the questions I have. It's really very little about what happens, on the mound most days. It's mostly between the years.
Again, it's just, I think George Kirby has what it takes to be one of the best pitchers in the game.
Yep.
I want to see him get there.
Yeah.
And so, I notice these things, and it's like, I feel like that might be keeping him from getting to that level that I think he absolutely can reach.
Yep.
So
agreed.
So I'm hoping that he is able to do that, and he is able to get to that level this year. I think he's absolutely capable, but it does start with getting more consistent swing and miss. He doesn't need to be an 11 strikeout per 9 guy, but he just needs to be able to miss more bats.
Mm-hmm. If he could eliminate, he has a few more of those blow up starts than even Logan does. If you can, eliminate half of those, it'll go a long way to getting him there too.
All right, we are going to go over the exciting duo of Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, so let's talk a little bit about Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo here, Colby. And we'll start with Miller, who, if you saw my appearance on the Marine Layer podcast last week, or the clip that they posted on social media, you already know that I am very excited about what Miller's 2025 could ultimately look like. And that is very simply because I think his path to generating more consistent swing and miss is pretty easy to see. Right? Miller has yet to average a strikeout per inning in his career. I think that changes with relative ease in 2025 for two reasons. One, that cutter that he has spent this offseason refining and is expected to be a much larger part of his arsenal. And two, that splitter that we saw last year, which was almost immediately one of the filthiest pitches in baseball. Among all pitchers that threw a splitter in 2024, Bryce Miller ranked second in splitter run value, right? Mark Leiter Jr. was the only pitcher ahead of him with a plus 11 run value on his splitter. Miller was plus 10. And Leiter, of course, is a reliever. So if you want to look at it from just a pure starter standpoint, no starter in baseball who threw a splitter in the year of our Lord 2024 threw a splitter that was better than Bryce Miller, right? And that's for a guy who had just learned the pitch, right? Pretty ridiculous stuff. So really the biggest question here with Miller is how does he perform on the road? The home road splits are pretty severe, far more severe than like Logan Gilbert, like we talked about earlier. 2.45 FIP at home for Miller, 4.88 FIP on the road. The strikeout per nine numbers also pretty wide gap between those numbers. 10.37 Ks per nine at home, just a 6.43 Ks per nine on the road for Miller. So is that like a batter's eye thing? We've talked a lot about that in Seattle and the effect of that in Seattle. So the road numbers need to significantly improve for Miller for him to get to where I ultimately think he can get to. Yeah, how are you feeling about Miller, Colby?
Yeah. It's worth noting, though, when you look at the home road splits in the second half, it is much more what you want to see. Bryce appeared to figure something out in the second half when pitching on the road. He was much better then. Miller, I don't know if he has elite stuff. I think he's got very good stuff. And I think he throws a ton of strikes, and he is
that splitter was pretty elite last year.
Only statistically, but it's number one in run value in terms of like movement and all that stuff. It pairs very well with his fastball. Sure. I do wonder if there's maybe more there. I would like to see a little bit more out of the breaking ball, the sweeper or the slider, whichever one he's throwing these days, probably both, and the curveball. I'm sure he's got that too. Bryce is pretty similar to Logan in that he constantly tinkers. He's constantly adding pitches. He's constantly trying new things. He throws a ton of strikes. He's very durable. But I do think there's more whiff to go get. And I don't know what form that comes in. This year, apparently, he's added the cutter. Well, he threw it a little bit last year, but this year he's really focused on it.
Refined it. Yeah.
So it's another weapon against lefties. Miller, judging by our poll, we didn't ask this question, but it kind of seems like fans, at least the ones who have answered our poll, kind of think Miller might be the second best pitcher in this rotation. And I get it. It feels a bit early to make that proclamation right now, but it could definitely be true by the end of this year. And Miller, again, he's got fastball, cutter, splitter, sweeper, slider, curveball. Like, does he have too many pitches? Maybe he has to pare it down a little bit. But he's going to throw a lot of strikes. He's going to compete. He tends to not let, bad things kind of blow up his start. Like, he's very even keel most of the time, and he's capable of going out there and dominating the lineup. I don't think that he's quite reached the levels of Gilbert, or maybe not even Kirby quite yet. And obviously he doesn't have the track record of Castillo, but Miller might be, by the end of this year, Miller might be the Mariners' actual number one. There's still some things to work on. I do think there's more whiff to get, but just as a baseline, he throws strikes.
Yep.
He gets a lot of soft contact, enough soft contact, and he's durable.
Yeah.
Hasn't missed a start in his major league career. I think he missed the last one last year with a blister, but that was because the Mariners were eliminated. So dude checks all the boxes. He's got the build that you want. Bonus, he's kind of a quirky dude. Like, Bryce Miller is a lefty who happens to throw righty. He's going to be a fan favorite, and he already is. And I think Miller could break out big this year and kind of establish himself in a way that Logan Gilbert has. As when people talk about, they're not the Garrett Coles of the world, but in that next tier, I think Miller could easily end up being in that discussion by the end of this year, not just from us who are kind of already starting to put him there, but from national people. And I think, Miller is going to gain quite a bit of recognition, could even make the All-Star team this year. I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Yeah. I love the pitchers that just challenge you, right? Here's my fastball, hit it. And that's
a word I'm not allowed to use.
Yeah. The heck you fastball, if you will.
The fudge you.
Yes. Sure. Yeah. Like
the mother father fastball.
Sure.
I assume we're talking about Bryan Woo now.
You got any others?
No, but if we're not talking about Bryan Woo right now, we're wasting everybody's time.
It's true. Yeah. Speaking of really good fastballs, Bryan Woo, man. Bryan Woo is he's definitely that to a T as well, right? as
More
good
so
as
than Bryce.
as good as Bryce Miller is, and as good as that fastball is coming out of Bryce Miller's hand, there might not be a better fastball in baseball than the one that comes out of Bryan Woo's hand.
Maybe Spencer Strider.
Yeah.
Like maybe.
Yeah.
But Woo's got 2 of them.
Woo's got 2 of them.
And both really
it's the
good.
it's the most effortless delivery you'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And he also doesn't get tagged for a lot of hard contact, which is wild, even though he almost exclusively throws these fastballs. Now, we did see some wrinkles here and there over the course of 2024 where he did dive into his secondaries a little bit more, but overall it was still a very fastball heavy approach from Woo over the course of the year. I'm interested to see if he gets into his bag a little bit more this year, but yeah, that's kind of like my major question with Woo going into 2025 is it just going to be more of the same, or are we going to see like this another, I hate to say this again, I feel like I'm abusing this this term, but like, are we going to see him kick into another gear?
Is he going to add another wrinkle?
Yeah,
it's tough to say with Woo because I mean, well, first and foremost, we just have seen less of him than we have anybody else in this rotation. And last year he missed the first month and he had a couple separate IL stints, but in the second half, it really felt like I don't want to say he learned to push through minor discomfort, because that's not exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But, he just kind of, went out there and he was just cutting it loose, really, at the end of the year. And it was just 4-seam, 2-seam at the top of the zone. And again, common theme in Mariners starters, he peppers the strike zone with the fastball. And the difference is that Woo's is so much better. Like, Luis Castillo has a very good fastball. It takes a lot to have the second best fastball in a rotation, or it takes a lot for
that fastball to be the second best fastball in a rotation.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. Honestly, it might be third best because Woo's 2-seamer is also really good. And like you said, it's so effortless. It explodes out of his hand. It looks like he's just playing the most casual game of catch. And obviously that helps. I think my question with Woo right now, or my primary concern with Woo, more so than development of his changeup and his slider, is like, hey man, can you take the ball 30 times?
Yeah.
Can he pitch every 5 days consistently? I think he can. I think he's had a bit of bad luck. It's certainly not he's not out of shape. It's not a delivery issue where he's just has such a high effort delivery that like it's so much wear and tear. We have to remember the dude has barely pitched since high school in the grand scheme of things. You look at the total number of innings he's thrown since he left high school, it averages out to like 60 a year. And that's with him throwing 120 last year. Like it really is nuts. And so, it's been, the Mariners have kind of played this long game with Woo. They've been very cautious with him. I think this is the year they kind of unleash him. I don't think they're going to ask him to throw 180 innings, but could he go 160? I think that's probably the hope this year. And Woo probably also has the furthest to go on his off speed stuff of anybody in this rotation. And yet he's still, on any given day, the best pitcher in this Mariners rotation. That's what's so exciting about Bryan Woo. So,
and he was even more in the strike zone than George Kirby was.
Mm-hmm.
He posted a lower walks per 9 than George Kirby in 2024.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. What we're talking about here.
The K9s dropped pretty significantly from year 1 to year 2.
And the walks and that might coincide with one another. Like the walks did go
I think they probably
down substantially.
Well, because also like word gets out, like this dude's going to throw you a fastball and it's probably going to be a strike. Yeah. And the fact that the league knows that like they're probably getting a fastball and it's probably going to be in the strike zone and they still can't hit it with any regularity speaks to how good those pitches are. Because like we always say, I don't care if you throw 110. If it's in the same spot every time, it's going to get destroyed eventually. Woo is going to throw the fastball 60, 70, 80% of the time. It's going to be in the strike zone 60, 70, 80% of the time. You know roughly where he's going to try to attack you, and you still can't hit that pitch. it really is incredible what Bryan Woo was able to accomplish.
I mean, last year, minimum 120 innings pitched. He threw 121.1 last year.
Mm-hmm.
He had the 22nd lowest hard hit rate against.
Yeah.
And he's exclusively throwing fastballs. Well, almost exclusively. Again, there was like a couple of starts where he actually threw his secondaries with some frequency, but and we're talking about that's a bit higher than some of these guys who are, you would consider to be more finesse guys, pitch to contact guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just going, screw you, hit my fastball.
Mm-hmm. The mother father fastball, let's call it on this show. I have a different name for it.
CTZ. Yeah.
Yes. And on
Subscribe.
Twitter. Yeah,
Twitter,
pretty much anywhere but here. I call it something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the most effortless delivery you'll ever see. It looks like a dad throwing to like his 8-year-old son, where he's like not trying to like scare him or anything, and then all of a sudden just pop. Like Woo might be the most fun guy to watch in the entire rotation, because like you know what you're gonna get. But on the days where he actually has like his best slider to go with the fastball, it's basically game over. Ask the San Diego Padres, ask the Yankees. Like, he will carve you up with a 4-seamer and a slider. And if he doesn't have the slider, there's still a decent chance he's going to carve you up with the fastballs. If Woo makes 30 starts this year, he's going to be a 4 or 5 win starter. Like, he's just that guy. He is that good. Yeah. So for me, it's about making your 30 starts. And then everything after that is, I mean, it's still important, but like if the changeup doesn't quite take that step we hope it does, or the slider isn't quite as sharp more sharp than it was last year, however you want to phrase, right? If the slider doesn't take a big enough step forward like we would like him to, if he still makes 30 starts, he's going to be a 4-win starter. Mm-hmm. Like he just, honestly, regardless if the whiffs go up or not, because it's soft contact, it's not a lot of home runs. He's not going to walk you. I think Woo is going to be a household name after this year.
Yeah, he also posted the 5th lowest barrel rate in all of baseball. Minimum 120 innings pitched. Throwing exclusively fastballs. No one could barrel him up.
Yeah. Last year, the opponents hit 225 off the fastball. That was their expected batting average. 262 WOBA, 276 X WOBA, 27% whiff rate on that pitch, and 36.6% O swing rate. When he threw it above the belt, upper third, right? 160 expected batting, 210 WOBA, 210 X WOBA, and a 31.6% whiff rate. Elite whiff rates on 4-seamers are 20, 28, 29, 30. Those are elite. Woo's 32% when he throws it up in the zone.
Yeah.
That's just the 4-seamer too, not even the 2-seamer.
And the 2-seamer to me is the more fun pitch.
I mean, it's a thing of beauty against lefties. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well,
we don't need to talk about Hancock.
Yeah, that's the 5 guys. I mean, there's the depth guys, but I mean, Brandon Garcia looks like he's going to be a reliever this year. So he's kind of out of the equation. Logan Evans, maybe at some point. But yeah, Hancock's probably the first guy if there's an injury or what have you. Knock on wood.
The depth guys are all the same. Okay, they throw strikes. The stuff is mediocre to okay. Like there's not much range there in the stuff, and they're going to have to grit their way through 5 or 6 innings.
And it's a significant drop off from many of the 5 guys in the rotation.
Yeah. I mean, there's just not a Logan Evans and Emerson Hancock right now. Basically, are going to give you roughly the same thing, and we'll see. You know, Evans could surpass Hancock, by May or June. But I do think that if something happens to this rotation, they'll trust Emerson. He'll get first crack at it. And, you just hope that it's not a disaster again.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for our show. Tomorrow we will look at the bullpen. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Tidy Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tidy Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.